What's going on, guys? Alex here, and today I'd like to answer a very complicated for me question, whether medical school is worth it. Winter holiday season is time for lots of people to make a throwback for the past year and to analyze everything that happened to them. I find this tradition really interesting, and the only thing I'd like to change to that practice during implementing that into my life is to analyze medical studies as a project, as a long-time project, to help some people make right decision by entering or not entering medical field. So I gathered pluses and minuses and the reasons to continue medical studies for me personally and for lots of people as well. If we're talking about pluses, I suppose that lots of people who are interested in medical field know them pretty well. That's a pretty decent paid job, that's kind of respect from the society, and so on and so on. And also it's very interesting as well. But what about minuses, and especially minuses of medical studies? So, let's say that you are accepted to medical school like me. Let's step aside high study price and high entry requirements. If we're talking about minuses of the medical studies, what is that? Then first of all, which you most probably know, that's a pretty long time to study. It takes 6 years mandatory to get a doctor degree, for in Latvia at least, and then up to 6 years of residency in the field which you'd like to work after. So it's at least 12 years for, let's say at least 6 years of mandatory and then 3 years for general practitioner, so at least 9 to 12 years to get a medical degree and to start working in the field you'd like to work in. That's a pretty long time to study, and to be honest, only in the past 3 years there is such type of work as medical assistant, who I am actually right now, and that's something like a nurse, but it has nurse duties, but it doesn't have all of the allowances which usual nurse has. And to be a medical assistant, you need to pass one subject, clinical care basics, for at least 80% as a final grade, and after that, the only thing you need is to have a little bit of experience by working in some type of hospital, even as a volunteer and so on. So you understand what's going on in the hospital. And this type of work is actually pretty decent paid, at least for me, in the intensive care unit. But the thing is that it's only since 2019 we have been able to work as a medical assistant, because before that we were able to work only as nurse assistants, and the pay there was much lower, and also it didn't bring very much for future doctors by working as a nurse assistant. So that was the problem, but still. The thing is that you can work as a medical assistant only after the 3rd year of your medical studies. That's okay, but the thing after is that after the 6th year of your mandatory studies, after you've got your doctor degree and you now are going to the residency, you are not able to work as a medical assistant. And that's, I find it pretty much a very big problem, because it limits your opportunities, because you have much more training than you've had after your 3rd year of medical school, but right now you cannot work in that field. You can only work as a doctor, and that limits you, as far as I know, to an intensive care, not intensive care, as an emergency doctor. So during an out-calls for the ambulance and during work in the emergency unit. But let's say you don't want to be an emergency doctor, so what you can do? Not pretty much actually, because the usual doctor who isn't resident cannot work in very lots of wards, and that's a pretty big problem, I find, because people need money to survive, and if we're talking about 6 years of mandatory studies to be a doctor, at least doctor with no residency, that means that you are at least 26, 27 years old, so I suppose you'd have a family, you live separately from your parents, and so on and so on. So you need at least €1,500 for Latvia to survive if we're talking about Riga, and if we're talking about pretty decent surviving. And that's pretty much a problem. So long time to study, and only at your 30s you will be a doctor finally. If we're not talking, of course, about general practitioners, they graduate, they finish their studies a little bit earlier, but that's the thing. Medical studies takes long time, and especially if we're talking about doctors, because for nurses, as far as I know, that's 4 years. For physician's assistants, it's something about 4 to 5 years. But still, it's pretty long time, but if we're talking about doctors, that's really crazy. The next thing, if we're talking about medical studies for a doctor, it's pretty hard. I know that everybody knows that it's hard, you know where you have entered and so on, but the thing is, it's not very hard because the study was designed that way. And it is hard because there is lots of theoretical information. For example, subjects like biology, chemistry, physics. Like, okay, we have 3 subjects, that's it? No, that's not it. There are different types and subtypes and combinations of these subjects. For example, biochemistry, physics, the biophysics right now we're having, different types of statistical analysis, different types of law, different types of the purely medical studies such as anatomy and human physiology, pathology, which, to be honest, it's something like biology combined with anatomy, clinical practice, and so on and so on. And these subjects, at least for medical studies in Latvia, it was designed in the way that till your 4th year of medical school, all of the subjects were parallel. That meant that all of the subjects which were meant for the semester, they were going parallel through the week. So you've had lots of information to study from different fields. And only in my 4th year, we were entered to such type of design of the studies as rotations, and to be honest, that's a simple breath of air finally, because the thing is that right now we're having like internal diseases course, and this internal diseases course is divided into rotations. And one rotation, that meant that for a week, for 2 or for 3 weeks, depending on the subject, this course is divided into these types of rotations. And this rotation contains only one subject. For example, I've had like 5 weeks of obstetrics, I've had 3 or 4 weeks of dermatovenerology, 1 week of hematology, 1 week of cardiology, and so on and so on. And so the only subject you need to really study hard during this week is the subject you're studying. So you're not having like tens of subjects to study during the week, and so you cannot find the time to dedicate to each and every one of the subjects. And that's the thing what is meant, at least for Latvia, when the medical students are talking about that the study is pretty hard. The study is hard because you need to know lots of information, and to know lots of information which is not so complicated, you need to understand it, but you don't really have time to understand it, especially if you are having family on your own, if you are having work, if you're working, and so on. That's for lots of subjects, that's pretty much impossible to have like an awesome grade, something like 90 or 100%, if we're talking about studying them parallel. That's pretty damn strategic, but I suppose that's only because the first 3 years are almost purely academic, because all of the subjects there are like physiology, anatomy, and so on. They are academically like a pre-course to your main clinical subjects, and that's why they suppose that they should be taught in the way as academic study is brought to the students, like in the parallel way. The only thing they forget that they are having like the subjects from different types of fields, so it's sometimes pretty hard to understand all of them simultaneously. The other thing which is pretty hard in the medical school is that that's full-time studies. I know you know that from the beginning, from the admitting to the university or the college, if you choose to take like a medical field major. But the thing that it is full-time studies, like you need to study 5 days per week, like mandatory. You need to attend classes, and even more in order to study, actually, to learn everything which was taught to you during the week. And first of all, it's really difficult to combine medical studies with work, especially, as I said before, during first 3 years of the medical school for Latvia. And to be honest, nothing except hospitals with 12 or 24-hour shifts suits these type of studies. Because just imagine that you are having like clinical subjects or any type of subjects from 8:30 a.m. in the morning until something about 4 p.m. in the afternoon, and after that you need to study what you have been taught, what the subjects which you discussed in order to understand it, in order to remember it, and also bonus to that, you need to go to work somewhere. And if we're talking about 8-hour work shifts, that's pretty much impossible, because if we're talking about afternoon shifts, that's impossible. Morning shifts, impossible. Night shifts, like, okay, theoretically you can manage that, but in that case you will not be able to sleep almost at all, and that's really nearly to impossible. The only thing left is that you can study during you can learn the subjects you need to learn during your weekend. But the problem here is that you can work in the weekend as well. So you study, you work, but the thing is that good luck finding any type of the field for work, like job opportunities, which can offer you only working during weekend. And even in that way, that will be a very low paid job, simply because you will not have enough hours to get a good salary. So the only thing left is like hospitals with 12 or 20 or 24-hour shifts, when you can work like 12-hour shifts once or twice a week during night, so you have a decent pay because of the night shift, and you have 24-hour shift during your weekend. So in that case, like, okay, it's possible, but once again, it's almost impossible if you are going to have a good grades and you want to work in the medical field during the weekend. Like, it's almost impossible, simply because you will not have enough time to do everything you need to do, and especially if we're talking about your chores, just forget about it. Also, the thing which goes from this full-time studies is that, like, you are very low on your free time, like hobbies, entertainment, leisure, and sometimes even relationships. You can forget about most of them, because here you have a very, very difficult choice of whether you are studying, or you are studying and working, or you are studying and having some of the free time, or you don't have any free time at all. And that's pretty much impossible. From my experience, from my first 3 years, I've had some of the free time, but if we can count down that on a calendar, that was like 1 or 2 evenings in a month, in a 2 months, in a 3 months sometimes, simply because you have to commute to different facilities, you have to study there. Some lectures can long more than 3 hours, 4 hours. You have different types of seminars, you have different types of subjects through the day, you want to eat as well, and so on and so on. And so by the end of the day, when you're like at home at 6 or 7 p.m., the only thing you really want to do is to go to sleep, and you're not able to do anything, but still you need to do at least something for your studies in order to understand the thing which were taught. So that's pretty hard. Right now I'm having a little bit more of the free time, and especially during the COVID times, when we had distance studies, much more of the free time we had. But still, still you're very low on the free time, so hobbies, entertainment, leisure, you can almost forget about it, because it's a full-time studies, and especially combined with the full-time work, now you won't have it. And the thing which comes from the full-time studies combined with the full-time work and low on the free time is a very high risk of mental diseases, for example, burnout, depressions, and other stress-related conditions. And that's a problem as well, because the people I know very closely, most of them are having some type of mental disease, some type of burnout, some type of depression, stress-related condition, and so on and so on. And for most people, there is a very big problem because of the stigma on psychiatry still exists, at least for Latvia. So not all of these people who really needs medical attention, who really needs help, they are not always going for help. And so hard studies, low on free time, combining work and studies, it all goes also with some mental diseases which can progress, and people still don't go for help. And many of the people simply quit the university, not because they cannot manage it academically, but because they cannot manage that psychologically, and they have some type of disease. And that's a problem as well. So you have much higher risks of mental disease if you are going to study, and especially if you are going to study and work at the same time. The next thing which also can cause higher risk of mental diseases is constant inadequate competition. It goes for Latvia in much higher way as, for example, the same Germany, because if you have a specialty you are desperate about, you should be number one on your course. Simply because we have in Latvia very, very low places for residency, and that's simply inadequate. So I'll explain a little bit more. The thing here is that if you are studying in Latvia in a medical school, after 6 years of your medical training, you are going to go to the residency. So residency, essentially, and that's a field where you are going to practice in the future. For example, in my case, right now I'm planning on either on general surgery or as an anesthesiologist or reanimatologist. So for my residencies, there is approximately 16 places per year for the whole Latvia for anesthesia and reanimatology, and up to 8 places per year for the whole Latvia for general surgery. And now think about that in Latvia there are 2 major medical universities, Stradiņš University and the University of Latvia, and combined totally we are having admitted each year something about 300 to 400 students. And imagine the thing that, not each and every one of them will graduate, but will graduate, let's say, at least 200 students. And so you are having 200 students, or even more, usually it's more, who'd like to be general surgeons or anesthesiologists. And with the general surgery and anesthesiology, it's pretty okay, to be honest, if we're talking about such a designated place as a cardiosurgery or neurosurgery. There is only 1 vacant place per 2 years. So first of all, you need to be number 1 not only on your course in your university, but in the whole Latvia, in order to be sure that you will get there. But also, the thing is that you cannot be admitted, even if you are number 1, in some years only because there are no available places left. And that's, to be honest, a very big problem. So if you have some designated place, you'd better to be number 1 or very close to it. If we're talking about some specialties such as cardiosurgery, neurosurgery, and so on. The only place the only residence which has lots of places available each and every year is like general practitioner or family medicine. It's something about 60 places per year. And the thing is that not all of them each year are fulfilled. So the only place left for lots of people who are not in top 10 or top 20 on their course is like the first choice is the place which they'd like to go, and the second choice is like general practitioner and family medicine, simply because they want to get into the residency. And you can say then what it is inadequate, because to be adequate, the competition should be for workplaces, not study places. So let's say we're going to have more cardio surgeons, more general surgeons, and so on. So let's have an adequate competition during the study process over there. So only the best will get the best places to work in Latvia, in Europe, and so on. So that will be a very adequate thing to do. Also, if we're talking about constant and inadequate competition, is that it is very low places on the budget studies for free tuition. If we're talking about Student University, it's much better there. It's like 200 places for free tuition, and something about 60 or 30 places for like on your own money to study there. In University of Latvia, it's quite opposite. It's something about 30 or 60 places for free tuition, and something about 100 places on self-financing. And that's pretty big problem. And also, if we're talking about residency as well, there is not only places where you can study like for free. There are also places you can study for your own money, and that's really dumb. Simply because you are actually working there as a surgeon, as an anesthesiologist, dermatologist, and so on, for lots of years, and you're not getting paid for it, at least for now. And you're actually paying something about 6,000 or 7,000 euros per year in order to work. So that's like very dumb thing in Latvia. So the free tuition is a very big problem in Latvia as well. And if we're talking about scholarship for medical studies, like in the university, not in the residency, there is only one place in the University of Latvia. So you should be on a budget studies, or so you should be on a free tuition, and each and every semester you should be number one on your course in order to get a scholarship, which, to be honest, isn't very big. The scholarship is something about 150 euros per month, and that's not enough to survive if we're talking about renting an apartment, or even renting a room, eating, and also paying for some utilities, paying for Spotify, paying for subscription on different type of university-related articles, and so on. So that's simply not enough, and so still you'll need to work, and there is only one place. Also, constant and inadequate competition not ends there, and there is also such type of courses as B and C courses. So I'll explain a little bit more. All of the courses in my university is divided into three types of courses: A, B, and C. So A course is a mandatory course which every single person who is on a medical studies should complete. And B course is a limited choice course, so you have been given choice of the 2, 3, 4 courses, and you should choose one of them in order to complete. And C courses are plenty amount of courses, and you should take only one of them. And in order to get like credit points, which and the mark, which will go to your diploma printout. And the thing is that there is also competition in order to get to some designated courses. For example, if we are talking about such courses, such easy courses for the C course, as for example Russian language or Latvian language, where you pretty much don't study anything, especially if you know the subject, if it's your like native language, there is very big competition. If we're talking about B courses, there are some very interesting courses, for example, like algology, or something like some type of sexual education. There is also a very big competition there. And so in order to get there, you'll need to have pretty good grades. Not top 10, but still, if you are like number 59 out of 60 students, most probably you won't have a choice where to go. You will go where there are 3 places left. And that's very, very dumb of them. Also, the thing which is very, very, very important if we're talking about medical school, especially in Latvia, it's a very high requirements and expectations from everyone, beginning from professors to doctors, nurses, other medical personnel, family, society, etc., etc., etc. So an example for that will be that when you are studying and you're only a student, like third or second year student, and you, let's say, work as a nurse assistant in a hospital, and you have a question to the nurse about something you don't know, which that was not in your subject, like you didn't have some type of internal medicine course and so on. They will most probably look at you and judge you because how you cannot know that. The same goes also to professors and doctors, because they probably forgot how it is to study in the medical field. They just forgot how it is to study, and they suppose that you have almost the same knowledge as they have, and the requirements are very big, are very great, and the expectations are very great as well, because most of them suppose and want you to know the information before professor, doctor, or somebody else has even spoken about it, and that you will have tons of books compressed into your memory, and so you can go through them and you can discuss every single topic they'd like to discuss. In most cases, it's okay, it's a legit requirement, but also there is something you don't understand why they want you to know that when you have just begun the course. It's also very very daunting, very difficult, and also here can reference to the high risk of mental diseases, because you have a lot of stress. You have some of the professors, for example, also one of the favorite my examples are my pathology professor, who says if you are going to write the same information I was talking about in the same words, I was bringing that to you on the colloquy or the exam, you will not get the grade more than 50%, even if every single one of the words are correct, simply because I want to see your work. And you're okay, it could seem legit if the pathology was the only one subject we are taking. We have lots of subjects other than pathology. We have lots of clinical subjects, we have lots of other things to do. And the fact that students have learned your words and they can recreate them, I can bring that to you, it's amazing. If the information is correct, then what's the problem? And that's what we're talking about, high expectations and higher requirements for the medical professionals and medical students especially. And talking about high risk of mental diseases, think about that you have a long time to study. In most cases you don't see actually the end of your studies in the nearest future, because right now I'm in the middle of my 4th year of the medical studies, and if I get in any of my designated residencies, I will have to study for 5 more years. So let's say 2 more years to study in a medical school and 5 more years to study in the residency. So it's 7 more years. I don't know what will happen in 7 more years. I don't know when it will end. So it's it looks like a lifelong studies. Next to that, the subjects don't get very much easier. Add to that you have full-time studies, and in my case I also combine that with the work. I also combine that with some type of hobbies, just in order not to get another burnout. and also add to that inadequate competition, constant competition for the places in the residency, for the budget studies. I am not even talking about scholarship, because I know that there are no chance I'm getting scholarship, at least right now. Also high requirements, and all of that brings us to mental diseases, to stress, to burnout, and especially burnout. And burnout is actually the thing which is researched, let's say so, by nurses during their diploma papers. It's like the most popular topic to research, like burnout between medical professionals, and especially nurses who are working, because a lot of nurses who are working, they're not working only in one workplace, they combine 2, 3, 4 workplaces. Some of them also study, like they decided to go to be a medical doctor, so they're studying as well. And so by the end of the day, you have like none of the free time, you sleep very little, you work a lot, and at the end of the day you get burnout. And after all of that, like, why do people continue studying? Why people are still graduating medical school if there's lots of minuses, and the only pluses are like some type of respect for medical professionals and adequately paid job, at least in Germany, Western countries, and so on, because in Latvia it's still a little bit of the problem. So the first thing I can think about is like family pressure. If medicine is the business of your family, if your family are like doctors, and or some of the family wants you to be a doctor, it's like family pressure, and you don't have very much of the choice to quit. The thing is that you will continue to study medicine even though it's not like your desired place to be, and even though it's pretty hard. Also, the thing is that financial pressure, and it also combines with some type of family pressure. If we're talking about not free tuition, but the tuition which is paid for you by your relatives, or you have taken credit for the studies, for the tuition, and some of the credit is paid by your relatives. Because even for Latvia, where fees are not as high as, for example, in the UK or United States, where it's simply like hundreds of thousands of dollars. In Latvia, it's something about from 16 to $60,000 euros per 6 years. So for medical studies, if we're talking about paid tuition for 6 years, and it also depends on which language you are studying in and where you're studying, but the lowest fee is like 16,000 euros per 6 years. And if your family is paying for you, in most cases you don't have any other choice for higher education, because you cannot simply afford it. And the thing here is that with the credit, that follows as well, because if you decide to quit like on your 4th or 5th year, there are no chance that you're getting another credit for your scholarship, for your schooling, before you paid the previous one, and so that you continue studying even though it's hard, you don't want it, and so on. Also, another thing why people continue is like inertia, because people are too deep into medicine to quit right now, and that's one of the pluses of the medicine, to be honest, that if you're like on your last years of the medical school, you can choose in which field you'd like to go. You want to go to the clinical medicine, you want to go to the research, to the lab work, and so on. And so you can find lots of places to go. Even some of the people, some people combine medical studies with, for example, law studies, and they become medical lawyers. So it's a very good opportunity as well, but still that's not the best thing to continue because of the inertia. because in most cases people actually don't know where to go else but the medicine, and then they don't have a choice, because in some cases they were told that you will go to the medicine and that's it, and they didn't even have time to think about where they'd like to go. And here we go to the most positive aspects of why to continue. And the thing is that the most people which continue studying medicine, at least for my course, they really do love medicine. They work in the medical field and they really like what they do. And even though it's hard, and even though all the previous minuses, they really love what they do, and they enjoy studying, they enjoy working, and so on. And also, the next point which goes after this one is that people don't actually know what to do except medicine, and they really love medicine. I suppose that's the best combination ever possible, because in that case you will be fully dedicated to the medical field, to the medical subject, and that's the best thing, the best argument to continue. If you're talking about me, why am I continue even though I was having like burnout, I am still having like depression, I treat for it, and so on and so on. The thing is that if we're talking about me, I am really used to studying medicine. I really used to that field. Next thing is like some type of family pressure, not like they are reminding me every single day, but they pay for my tuition, and that's why I understand that that's not the easiest thing for them to do. So it's also some type of family pressure, even though they don't tell me about it very often. But the main thing why I really continue studying medicine is that I really love what I do. For example, when I was working during my gap year at the online casino, I really hated that job. I hated going there, I hated being there, I didn't enjoy doing anything there. But if we're talking about work at the hospital, I really like what I do, even despite very often, in most cases, it's much harder than dealing cards. Also, how to understand that you really enjoy doing what you do, that it is the only thing you can talk for long periods of time, and that's medicine. And to be honest, I can see right now that I'm going over 30 minutes, and I have very much to talk about medical studies, and that's only medical studies, not even medical work in the medical field, that you can talk about it for long periods of time. And when you're talking to your friends, especially if they are from a medical field as well, you can talk for ages with them about medicine, about medical related topics, about let's say different types of medical practices and so on. Also, for me applies the thing that I do not know what I'd like to do except medicine. So let's say I've got kicked out of the medical school for some reason, I don't know. I don't know where I'd go next if I got banned from the medical field. Like, I might try myself in many places. I like law studies, I like art, I like videography, journalism, and many more, but I don't see myself in any of those places or jobs for a lifetime. At the same moment, like OR, ICU, ER are another very stressful environments. I adore and I really enjoy being there, even despite the work there is pretty hard, and not always it's like a very friendly place to be. Also, one of the things which I have noticed is that I can stay hours after my shifts because I really enjoyed what was happening there. For example, at my previous workspace, also in the ICU, when I was like a nurse assistant, I could stay for hours even after my shift has ended, and I can really go home and have a break and have a really nice sleep for like 9 or 10 hours. I prefer to stay at my workplace in the ICU simply because I enjoyed seeing what is going on there, even despite I have seen that for many times. The same central venous catheter, this catheterization, the same CT, X-ray, or some like procedures which I have seen, which I have participated in for lots of and lots of time. I stayed there because I enjoyed it, and at some time, like, I found myself, like, the shift ended at 8 a.m. and I found myself, like, it's 2 p.m. and I'm still at my workplace simply because there's also something interesting happening right there. In the conclusion, is medical school worth it? It depends on you. The same as with anything else, if we're talking about is it worth it, it depends on you. If you really love what you do, if you can handle lots of stress, constant peer pressure to do better than you can because of the constant competition, if you like medicine so much that you can spend hours after the shift or after your classes to talk about the medicine, to see actual procedures, and you can spend days at the hospital and absorb every single thing that happens there. And if your mental state allows you to be in the constant stress for long periods of time, if you can do everything it takes to understand and remember lots of material, and you really love what you do, and if you find that medical field is like the only thing which you can do for a lifetime, then it's worth it. In other case, it really is not. And before the beginning, like the final words on how to understand whether medical field is right for you, even especially if you are like a high school graduate and you choose where to go, where to apply to. The only thing which is like universal for most people is not to talk to students, not to talk to the professors and so on. The thing is to go to work as a SIM nurse assistant or to volunteer in a local hospital, and in best case scenario, it would be like the biggest hospital available to you. It's like not like a regional hospital, but like the first hospital, the first one of the hospitals in your area, like not regional, but the major one. And to work in some type of intensive type of wards, such as, for example, ER, OR, ICU, and so on, so you can see more practical fields of medicine and decide whether it fascinates you for a long period of time. And by that I mean not to volunteer there for like 2 weeks and like, yeah, I love medicine, but to volunteer there and to work there for like long periods of time, for months and months, simply to understand whether the work you are doing, so when it becomes your routine, will it still fascinate you? Will you still like and love what is happening right there? And if only if it'll fascinate you still, that can be a first call that perhaps medical field is like suited for you, and that medical studies is like the thing to choose. Also depends on lots of factors, and if we're talking about the United States, it's also financial factor and so on. But still, the first thing, in my opinion, before going to the medical field and medical studies, you should understand whether you love medicine, because in medical field, if you don't love what you do, you cannot handle this type of stress, this type of work for a very long period of time, let alone work there for a lifetime. The thing I'd also would like you to know about medical studies and the work in the medical field, that I have met there one of the best people in my life. One of the best of my friends are from my medical school. One of the best people I know are from the medical field, from the both ICUs I have worked or work in, and that's pretty much amazing. The whole medical community, how they help each other, even despite this constant competition, even despite the work is hard. The fact how it is happening, at least for Latvia, it is simply amazing how they support each other, even though the work is hard, even though the studies are very hard. And if you are ready for such type of commitment, when you are studying for long periods of time, when you are working for long hours, when the work you do is not very easy at all, when the studies is not easy at all. But if you are ready to support each other, if you are ready for this type of commitment, then that's a simply perfect place. At least for me, that's a very perfect place. And even despite lots of things have happened for these almost 4 years, for me, if we're talking about the medical studies only, then 4 years. In other case, then that's almost 5 years. Even though lots of things have happened, even though my mental breakdowns, even despite breakdowns, even despite burnouts, despite depression, financial debt, and so on, even though I really love what I do, and I find that that's amazing, and I'm a very lucky person to have such type of opportunity to study and to work in the place I work and study, simply because that's really a really good place to be if you are ready and if you are prepared and if you really like what you do. In any case, thank you for being here with me. That's it for me, and that's more than 45 minutes already, one of the longest my single podcasts for a long period of time. Anyway, thank you for being here with me. Happy New Year, and I hope you've had very Merry Christmas. Hear you next year.